Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're going to take a few minutes to just let everybody kind of join us, any last minute stragglers, and then we'll start talking about different ways to target stress and get some extra tools in our tool bags. And also we'll talk a little bit about the effects of stress on our bodies too. Welcome to the new people that just joined us. There's still a few more people adding on, so we'll just give them an extra minute or two. Let us know if you're having any issues hearing the audio. So thank you everyone for joining us today. This is the Beat Stress to End 2020 Feeling Better Than Ever webinar. So I appreciate you taking the time to join me, and hopefully you'll get a lot out of this today. To give you a little bit of orientation to a webinar jam, there is a chat box to the right of the screen if you're on a computer. And if you're on your phone, then just scroll down below the video, and then you'll be able to see the chat box there as well. So you can type in any questions or comments that you have. We do like this to be an interactive presentation. So if you have any questions, please type them in to the chat box as they come up, and we will answer them as best we can. And then make sure to stay till the end because there is a special offer for those people that attend the webinar today. So that way you can find out all about that. So I am Dr. Barbara Ezrre. I'm a physician here at Desert Wellness Center. I specialize in hormone balancing, and I love, one of my passions is working with people with mental emotional well-being, because I think that is an area of our health that is very much neglected in medicine. Unless you actually have mental illness, a lot of doctors really won't talk to you about how to really improve your mental emotional well-being. And it's just as important as our physical health, because if our hearts and minds aren't in the right place, even if our body is, it's still going to cause us issues, and we really are never going to be truly like optimally healthy until our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual parts of our bodies are also healthy. So I want to talk about the effects of chronic stress. Some of them you may be aware of, and then other areas some people may not be as aware of. So when we are under stress for long periods of time, it typically will start to affect our sleep. We have a harder time falling asleep, staying asleep. Our energy tends to drop. It really affects our mental function, so it's difficult to concentrate, harder to remember things. It then affects our work and other areas of our life, decreased productivity at work. We're less likely to be able to think as critically as well as before, and less creatively. It can really affect our mood, causing some depression, anxiety, irritability. I'm sure we've all experienced those times that we've been under stress and we like snap over the tiniest little thing. Suddenly small things seem like huge things. It slows down our metabolism, so we tend to gain weight, especially around the midsection is a really common area for it to affect when we're under stress. And then we tend to get sick a lot more frequently. So I'll often have patients come in who overall have been feeling okay, but they're just getting sick every like few weeks, or anytime their kids bring home something from school, like they get sick too. And that's an effect of chronic stress, and the effect on the immune system also will lead to increased inflammation. So a lot of like chronic pain and chronic illness we know now is due to inflammation. And then when we're under chronic stress, the first thing that tends to go out the window is our nutrition and exercise and all those good self-care habits. And so then it just kind of spirals after that. And then chronic stress also really affects our hormones, and hormones are really center to our well-being. So once we start seeing those hormone imbalances, then we start having a lot of other issues being affected. This picture got a little bit scrunched up in the webinar, but just to kind of review very briefly, it's not as complicated as it looks, but basically all of our sex hormones come from cholesterol, which is why cholesterol is important, and it's not all bad. So from there, we're able to make progesterone, cortisol, our stress hormone, and then on the right side, the estrogens and the testosterone. So this is why all of the hormones are affected when one hormone gets thrown off, because it will literally throw off the balance of all of the other hormones. So cortisol, our stress hormone, this gets thrown off when we are stressed, when we're overworking, when we're burning the candle at both ends. And so it definitely will affect our energy levels, cause that weight gain, especially around the belly. We tend to crave a lot more like sugar and caffeine and stimulants and carbs when cortisol is imbalanced. So if you're ever noticing like you just feel like a little drug addict trying to find every tiny little piece of like chocolate at home after dinner, a lot of times that'll be the cortisol that's imbalanced, and your body's trying to get a stimulant. It affects our brain function, especially the brain fog, where you just feel like your thinking is really muddled. It becomes harder to manage stressors when cortisol is imbalanced, and the other like sleep and mood changes. Libido also tends to go down. And actually, let's do a quick poll question. So on your chat box, you will see, or where the chat box is, you will see the question coming up. So what percentage of Americans have trouble sleeping because of stress? A, 10%, B, 22%, C, 48%, or D, 63%. Give it another 5 seconds. Looks like most people are between B and C is starting to pull ahead. And C is actually the correct answer. So almost half of all Americans, like one of the first symptoms that'll come up is the trouble sleeping. And I would venture to guess that especially in the last month, a good percentage of Americans were having trouble sleeping with the craziness of this year. So it is very common, and for a lot of people, once the sleep gets thrown off, then everything else is downhill. It's much harder to manage life when you're not sleeping well. And as cortisol becomes imbalanced, oftentimes it'll put more strain on the thyroid, and then thyroid also gets imbalanced as well. And thyroid conditions are highly underdiagnosed. Most physicians are diagnosing based off purely off of labs and waiting for the labs to like become abnormal, which unfortunately misses a huge chunk of people that are in the suboptimal range for a good 10 years before the labs actually catch up. So by looking at symptoms and the whole picture and really getting people in those optimal ranges, we're able to catch people a good 10 years before the labs finally become abnormal, which means that then we can turn around how they're feeling and get that self-care back in check. And so really helps to prevent a lot of those long-term chronic diseases like diabetes and cardiovascular disease. So because thyroid affects every single cell of the body, there's a lot of symptoms. There's at least 100 symptoms for low thyroid function. These are just a few, but definitely fatigue, especially that like where you feel like you could just keep sleeping. It's really hard to get up in the morning. And when you do get up, it feels like it takes forever for your brain to actually turn on. That is typically low thyroid. So it affects a lot of like memory and concentration issues, the slower thinking. Also contributes to a lot of like weight gain, and feeling cold hands and feet is also really common for thyroid issues. And then low thyroid also can be a common cause of anxiety as well. So for a lot of people that are experiencing anxiety, it may actually be like a physical issue that's causing that mood change. And then a lot of chronic pain and like muscle aches, joint pain also can be related to the thyroid. So progesterone, and I forgot to mention progesterone and all of the sex hormones, men and women all have these hormones. It's just in a different balance if you're a man or if you're a woman. So for women, progesterone is obviously going to be higher than for men, and it's really affects like PMS and like perimenopause is the time when it becomes imbalanced. So this is in our 30s and 40s, especially if cortisol has become imbalanced and we've been under a lot of stress in our teens and 20s, 30s, then that's going to make it so that progesterone will become imbalanced, and then we start having more issues with PMS and that perimenopausal time. Because what's normal is for us to go into menopause and not have any symptoms, just like stop having periods and that's it. But because of the burning candle at both ends and all the stress that we're under as Americans, we as a society tend to have a lot more symptoms going into menopause than other cultures. So common progesterone issues will be like the heavy periods, the cramping, all mood changes before your cycle, bloating, lots of cravings, and so a lot of women have experienced this. And again, there's help for that. You don't have to suffer through that every single month. And then testosterone can be imbalanced, and it's just as important for men as it is for women to have optimal grumpy old man syndrome. That's low testosterone for a lot of guys. And then for women that just, will have a lot of mood swings, that can also be the low testosterone. It really affects our metabolism, muscle, and fat composition. So we tend to gain more weight and lose muscle tone as testosterone goes down, and really affects our brain function. So for a lot of people, in our 30s and 40s, all of a sudden we start to feel like we can't remember things as well. It's harder to focus. We're having a lot of brain fog. Our thinking feels like it's all muddled. A lot of that is testosterone, and that can definitely affect our work life. So a lot of patients will come in and they'll just say, like, I'm really struggling at work. I feel like I can't do my job, and I'm just so stressed out because I feel like I'm going to get fired because I can't do it. My brain's just not functioning. And so a lot of times it is these hormone imbalances. And testosterone also is going to affect our sexual function. So libido will tend to go down, and a lot of vaginal dryness can happen with that as well. And joint pain, muscle aches, night sweats are also really common symptoms of low testosterone. And then estrogen. So estrogen in women will usually go down once we get close to menopause. because we have a lot of estrogen. So even if it drops a bit before we get to menopause, there's still enough to buffer that change. So as we get into menopause, then we see the hot flashes, the sleep issues is really common, memory, concentration changes, the mood changes, especially like crying more easily, irritability, a lot of fatigue, and then a lot of like vaginal dryness, higher risk for like frequent urinary tract infections. And then our bones tend to get weaker as both estrogen and testosterone decrease. Yep. And then the next poll question, getting used to this webinar, Jab, and how we do polls in here. So the next poll question is going to be, nope, the previous one. For the menopause, the average age of menopause. So what is the average age of menopause? A, 40, B, 47, C, 51, or D, 55? So it'll take about 5 more seconds. Our choices are age 40, 47, 51, or 55. All right, and it looks like most of you got that right. So it is age 51 is the average age of menopause, but we can start menopause as early as age 40 and as late as age 55. And there are some women that even go beyond that, and that is considered late menopause. And that just doesn't sound like very much fun to have Aunt Flo visiting that for that long. Switch back to the chat. And okay, so like I mentioned earlier, the more that we manage our stress and really get that cortisol in balance before we hit menopause, menopause becomes a much easier transition, not to mention even just perimenopause before that. And men go through a very similar thing, such as menopause, which is called andropause. It's just a little bit slower and happens over a longer period of time, so they don't feel it as suddenly as we feel it. So one of the things that I like to remember this quote by Tony Robbins. He said, stress is not what happens to us, it's our response to what happens, and response is something that we can choose. And I just thought this was a really powerful quote because it really puts it back on ourselves. Like we really have a lot more power than what we think we have, even when we're under a lot of stress. Because ultimately you create your experiences in life. So you're responsible for your thoughts and your beliefs, the images that you see in your head, whether that you focus on, whether they're internal or external, and then the resulting emotions that you create, that those things create. So as you think about something, as you visualize it in your mind, what is the emotion that's triggering it? Is it triggering something happy? Is it triggering sadness? Is it triggering anxiety? So you can shift what you're thinking, what you're focusing on to really shift how you are feeling. But you have to have that awareness to be able to do that. So if you're not stopping to think about the thought that you're having in that moment or what you're imagining, then you're just going to be controlled by your emotions. But if you take a step back and just become aware of your emotions, so almost like you're looking at them from the outside in, then you can actually start to see, oh, I'm feeling so anxious right now because I'm thinking about this thing, or I'm remembering this thing that happened when I was a kid, and now I'm remembering that same feeling of anxiety that I felt back then. But once you have that awareness, then you can take a step back and say, okay, well, I don't need to be thinking about that right now. I can choose to think about something else that makes me actually feel a positive emotion. Or you can just, even having that awareness of you're feeling the way you are now because of something that happened years ago, I can choose to let that go so that it's not continuing to affect me in my current life. So I like to live my life believing that I'm 100% responsible for everything that happens in my life. So regardless of what it is, I'm going to take the stance that I am 100% responsible, because that's how I am able to hold on to my power and really affect change in my life. So I use a formula to be able to think about this. So E stands for event, and then R is your response, and O is the outcome. And the event is stationary. That's not going to change. But the R, your response, that is where your power is, because you can change how you choose to respond to something. And depending on how you respond, that's going to change the outcome. And so if you really look at how you are reacting to things in life, you may start to see, oh, I, could really choose a different response, and then I don't need to, and then I could have an outcome that actually works better for me. So you basically have two choices with any event. You can blame the event. You can get frustrated that our summer lasted like way too long this year and we were stuck indoors because we're quarantining, or you can focus on your response and just acknowledge that it is what it is, or you can take that as an opportunity to get out of town and do a lot more day trips and explore nature and enjoy the rest of Arizona, since the Phoenix area was a little too hot this year. So whatever it is, whatever the event is, by changing your response, you get a different outcome. So you can work that to your advantage. So it actually helps you to be able to let go of some of the stress, let go of some of the things that are bringing you down, that are causing you more anxiety, depression, or making you crankier. So you basically have three responses that you have any control over. The first one is your behavior, including how you say, what you say it, and how you say it, because that's some people are gonna take offense to what you're telling them or how you're saying it. And there's ways to do things to talk to other people so it's not causing more friction. And then for yourself internally, you can look at how you're talking to yourself, because whether we like it or not, all of us talk to ourselves. Whether we're ready to admit it or not, everybody does. And a lot of times these thoughts are, it can be unconscious as well as conscious. And so the beliefs that you're having about yourself or your life. And so when you start to examine them, then you can kind of start to have some awareness as to like why you're acting the way that you are, or why things have turned out in your life the way that they have. And then you can also, focus on like the visual images, including images of your future, and how that's affecting your life. So I want to get into the tapping technique. So it's called the emotional freedom technique. It's been around now for several decades, and it is a combination of acupressure points and cognitive behavioral therapy. So it's been kind of was in development for many decades, but a big turning point happened around 1979 when Roger Callahan, who is a psychologist, was working with a patient who had a big fear of water. Like she couldn't get anywhere near water without having like an anxiety attack. And he had tried all different techniques, talk therapy, hypnosis, kind of all his tools in his tool bag, and nothing was working for her. The anxiety wasn't getting any better. And then he remembered there was an acupuncture point just below her eye that was related to the stomach meridian, which ties into fear. And so he had her just start tapping that point. And fairly quickly, the fear of water went away. And then since then, they've added a lot more cognitive behavioral therapy to it. So it can be a kind of a combination of the acupressure and the cognitive behavioral therapy. And the reason those points are so important is because they are areas where there's a lot of nerves. And so that it's basically kind of like a direct connection to your brain to send a calming signal. So the benefits of tapping, they can reduce negative emotions. It can clear negative thoughts and beliefs. It can even work on a physical level and helping to eliminate pain or decrease pain. It can help with decreasing food cravings. So a lot of people use it to support weight loss. And then in high performance, it can actually help optimize goals as well. So it can actually push more of those, the positive feelings and the help you be able to get into a better state of mind to help you achieve your goals. So we're going to do our next poll question, and that is, what percentage decrease in cortisol do we see after 1 hour of tapping? So the choices are 8%, 15%, 24%, or 45%. We'll give a few more seconds, let people choose their options. So just take a wild guess. We haven't really talked about it yet. But I wanted to show this because there are actually quite a few studies on the emotional freedom technique that show its benefit. And so there is actually scientific evidence for it. So after 1 hour of tapping, there is a 24% decrease in cortisol. But if you just remember the sequence, like that is going to be helpful in and of itself. So before you start the sequence, you're going to rate whatever it is that you're feeling on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest. And you always want to do this before the tapping and after the tapping. So if you're feeling like really overwhelmed and anxious about like everything that you have to do, getting ready for the holidays, finishing up that work project, you know, whatever it is that's going on, just rate that, like sit, just kind of close your eyes, take a breath, and just think about everything that's on your mind. And then as that feeling comes up, then rate that on a scale of 1 to 10. If it's not something that happens, that's happening right now in the moment, then think back to the last time that happened. So maybe right now you're not feeling so anxious, but like last week when you know, your boss yelled at you and then you got home and your husband and you got into a big argument, like think about that day. And then as those feelings come up, as if you were like reliving them, rate that on a scale of 1 to 10. And then after that, you're going to start tapping on the side of your hand. So you're going to use your pointer finger and middle finger, and you'll just start tapping on the side of your hand, just right at that point there. And you want to just tap hard enough where you can definitely feel it, but it doesn't need to be like painful or anything. And then you'll just tap that like 35 times. Sometimes you'll do a setup statement as you're tapping that point. So you can say, even though I feel really overwhelmed right now, I totally and unconditionally love and accept myself. Or even though I'm really angry right now, I totally and unconditionally love and accept myself. And sometimes you are so upset or that you may not be able to like remember the whole sequence. And even if you just tap this point right here 35 times, that'll be enough to just kind of start to settle you down. I'll use that when I do my public presentations. I'll just sit there before that and just kind of tap under the table 35 times, and just helps me kind of calm down, get those little jitters out of the way. Or just like any time where you're feeling a little bit nervous, you can just tap that point and it'll start to settle you down a little bit. And then after you do that side of the hand, then you're going to go up to the eyebrow and just tap right here, right above the inner part of the eyebrow. And again, just tap maybe like 5 to 10 times. And then you'll go to the next point, which is the side of the eye. So just outside of your eye here. And then under the eye is the next point. And I can't see any of you guys, but I hope you guys are doing this as I'm doing it, just so you get the practice. And then under the nose, you tap under the nose here, and then a few more under the chin. And then the collarbone point is going to be just under like the inner part of your collarbone in that little soft spot here. And then you'll tap under your arm, and then at the top of the head. And then after that, you'll repeat. So I usually like to do a minimum of 3 rounds. So before I rate the emotion that I was feeling, I'll go back to the eyebrow point. So the karate chop point, you only do the very first time, but after you do the top of the head, then you come back to the eyebrow and then the side of the eye, under the eye, and you go through the sequence. And again, one more time. back up to the top of the head, all the way down to the underarm, the last round, and then back to the top of the head. And then once you finish at least 3 rounds, then you'll take a few deep breaths again. I do usually like to close my eyes as I'm doing the sequence, just so I can be more focused, not getting distracted by anything that's happening around me. But it'll still work even if your eyes are open. And I admit I have actually done this at Home Depot when we did our remodeling, and was at Home Depot for like the 4th time that day. So you can do this even in public. I promise nobody is like paying attention. So you can really do this anytime that it comes up. And I am getting a question here. So is there a good time of the day to do this? So that actually is a really good question. I like to recommend doing it like first thing in the morning, because that's when your subconscious mind is the most calm, before your mind gets ahead of itself and starts thinking about all of those, things that you have to do for the day, and anxiety starts creeping in, or, other emotions. So I like to do this just first thing of the day. If there's something that you're trying to clear, you can work on that if it's a negative emotion, or you can set the intention for what kind of a day you want to have. So you can, you can think about like peace. Like if that's your intention for the day, just to have peace, then you can go through the sequence. And as you're tapping every point, then you can just recite to yourself like peace, 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 or like peace and calm, peace and calm. And I like to say whatever word that is, that positive intention, 3 times in each point before I move on to the next point. And then there's a few other questions coming up. So you can do both sides at the same time. I think the more, if you are more overwhelmed or the emotion is stronger, you can go ahead and do both sides at the same time, but you don't have to. And there isn't a specific number of times that you have to tap each point. So roughly like 5 or 10 times in each spot after you do that initial karate chop point. Mainly, it just depends on the words that you're saying, if you are saying extra words. So just keep tapping as you're saying like peace and calm, peace and calm. You can also use this to clear like negative memories and other like feelings that you're, so as you're getting more advanced, then you can use longer statements. So as you would tap, one point, you might say, even, I'm feeling really overwhelmed by all of the projects that I have going on at work, and my boss is, I feel like my boss is really disappointed with me. So as you say each sentence, then you can just move on to the next point for the next sentence. So it doesn't really matter how many times you're actually tapping on each point. You just want to do it a minimum of a few times. And you don't have to actually do this for an hour. The study that I mentioned in the poll question, that was just a study to show that it can be really effective in reducing cortisol levels. But you can do this in like 2 minutes. Start your day out doing it 2 minutes, just to start out the day and get you in a good place. Or if you're already really overwhelmed or on the verge of a panic attack, you can just take a minute or 2 to run through the sequence, and that'll start to bring you down and bring down that anxiety. And I did forget to mention, so after you do your 3 deep breaths, you do want to rate whatever emotion you're feeling. So if it was anxiety and you were 9 out of 10, but after you do the sequence, it's now back to 5 out of 10, then you would go ahead and repeat the sequence and do 1 more round. And then that should bring it down to hopefully under a 3, because you want to be about a 3 or below. So, the emotions, whatever it is that you were feeling, is pretty well like managed at that point. And sometimes other emotions will come up as you start to clear like the anxiety. Maybe now you feel really angry about something that happened. Whatever it is that comes up next, just go with it and work through that as well. And if you have a lot of anxiety or sleep issues, it can be really helpful to do this before bed, to really be able to let go of whatever happened during the day, so that you can actually like feel calm and get more restful, relaxing sleep. I like to do it at the beginning of the day because I think of it as like if you're at the top of the hill of a hill and there's a car that doesn't have the emergency brake on, if that car starts to roll down the hill, you want to get in front of it at the top of the hill, right? You don't want to get in front of it and try to stop it when it's already gained a lot of momentum. So the reason that you do it in the morning is because you're already calm, you're in a good place. It's easier to get you into a more balanced state than waiting until things are really off. And then somebody else also asked, does this work for children? And that is a great question. It is really great for kids. That's why this picture is of a little boy, because I've actually taught this to even as young as like first graders. In general, they have to be able to sit still long enough. So I think probably first like 6 years and up works pretty well. Below that, they're going to have a harder time really focusing and not getting distracted. But they can just learn the sequence, and they learn it really easily, and they'll start to recognize when their bodies feel. In a nutshell, is the tapping technique. Really easy technique to use that can really shift how you're feeling within a matter of a couple of minutes. So thank you everyone for joining me today, and as part of the webinar today, and look forward to seeing you guys again next time. Take care.